Jack Dawson woke up to the sound of beeping machines and the sterile scent of antiseptic that always seemed to linger in the air of hospitals. At first, he thought he was dead. That would explain the feeling of being suspended between worlds, as though his body had been left in limbo. But then, as his eyes fluttered open, a rush of clarity overwhelmed him. He wasn't dead. At least, not yet. He groaned as he pushed himself up, wincing. His body felt strange, lighter than he remembered, almost weightless, but there was no pain, none of the usual aches that came with a body that had just endured the kind of trauma he had. His last memories were fuzzy: fire, the crash, the screams. But the worst of it seemed gone, vanished into thin air. His fingers grazed the smooth bandages wrapped around his chest and arms, but beyond that, there was nothing. No bleeding, no signs of the burns that had once marred his skin. He felt, well, fine. Better than fine, actually. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The room spun for a second, but it was more from disorientation than dizziness. His reflection in the mirror was a stranger's face, tired eyes, unshaven, but otherwise, healthy. Better than he had ever looked. His skin, once blistered and cracked, was now smooth, like the wounds never happened. He touched his chest, then his arms, but there was no scar tissue, no discolored marks from the burns that had nearly consumed him. How long was I out? Jack asked, more to himself than anyone else. A soft knock came at the door before it creaked open, and a nurse in her mid-20s entered, her face full of surprise as she saw Jack standing there. Her name tag read Laura. Her wide eyes flickered from his face to his chest, then back to his face again. "You're awake," she said, her voice uncertain, almost reverent. "Dr. Bishop said you'd be conscious soon, but I didn't expect you to be up already. How are you feeling?" Jack smiled, trying to shake off the unsettling sensation of having no memory of how he got there. "I feel amazing. Almost like nothing happened. No pain. No scars." He chuckled, though the sound was a little hollow. "This is some kind of miracle, huh?" Laura seemed to hesitate. "You don't remember what happened?" Jack frowned, trying to piece the fragments of his memory together. He remembered the accident. A car crash. Flames. Then nothing, only emptiness. He stopped himself. "No. I guess I don't. What happened to me?" Laura looked a bit uncomfortable, but she smiled softly. "You were brought in 2 days ago. Severe burns, multiple fractures. You're a walking miracle, Mr. Dawson. The doctors can't explain it. You should be in much worse shape. You should still be in surgery. But here you are, up and talking." His heart skipped a beat. "So, I should be dead?" Laura nodded, her eyes wide. "I'm not a doctor, but that's what they told me. You healed faster than we could even understand. They were expecting you to have complications, maybe organ failure, but there's nothing. You're completely healed." Jack blinked. This was impossible. He remembered the agony of the crash, the excruciating burns that had seared his skin, the bone-crushing pain when the car had crushed him. And now? Nothing. His body felt like it had been renewed, restored. As if sensing his disbelief, Laura added, "You should speak to Dr. Bishop. She's the one overseeing your recovery. She's very interested in your case. I'm sure she'll explain everything in more detail." "Dr. Bishop?" Jack muttered, a bit absent-minded, still processing the idea that he had just experienced something close to a miracle. "Sure. Where can I find her?" Dr. Anna Bishop was younger than Jack had expected. In her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, steady presence, she looked more like someone who belonged in a laboratory than a hospital ward. She entered Jack's room with a small notebook in hand and a look that suggested both curiosity and concern. She set the notebook down on the bedside table, her gaze never leaving Jack. "Mr. Dawson," she began, her voice steady but with an underlying urgency. "I'm Dr. Bishop. I've been overseeing your case." Her eyes skimmed over him, her expression unreadable. "I've never seen anything like this. We've run every test we can, and you've recovered at a rate no one should be able to. Your cells, they're regenerating, but at a pace we can't explain. We thought, initially, you were experiencing some kind of rare healing response, but this goes beyond anything we've seen." Jack blinked. "I'm healed. That's all I need to know, right?" Dr. Bishop gave him a thin smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're healed now, but the process is complicated. Every cell in your body is undergoing hyperregeneration, but there's a catch." Jack frowned, his stomach turning slightly. "A catch?" "Yes," she said, her tone now more serious. "There's a limit to how many times your cells can regenerate. Every cell in your body, your skin cells, bone cells, nerve cells, can only repair themselves so many times before they simply stop working. We don't know how long you have, but the healing process has a finite number of chances. Every injury, every strain on your body, will cost you one of those chances." Jack looked at her, incredulous. "Wait, you're telling me I can't just heal forever? That I'm running out of chances?" "Exactly," Dr. Bishop replied. "Your body is healing, yes, but every time it heals, it takes a toll. And eventually, you'll reach a point where your cells can no longer regenerate. The risks are high." Jack stared at her. His mind whirled. "So, I'm immortal, but only for a while?" Dr. Bishop nodded grimly. "Yes. For now, you're healing at an extraordinary rate. But the damage your body has taken, combined with the limits of your cell's regeneration capabilities, means that sooner or later, the system will break down. We just don't know when. It could be months, years. Or it could be sooner than that." Jack's head was spinning. "So, I'm going to die? Just like that?" He gestured at his body, the one that felt so alive, so perfect now. "And it's all just temporary?" "We can't be sure," Dr. Bishop said softly. "But we do know this, your cells are regenerating. And we don't understand why. It could be a genetic anomaly, an accident. But whatever the cause, it means you're living on borrowed time. And every time you get injured, you're draining your cells' healing chances." Jack laughed, a bitter sound. "Great. So I'm living in a ticking time bomb." "I wish I could give you a clearer answer," Dr. Bishop said, a touch of sympathy in her voice. "But all we can do now is wait and see. I'd recommend avoiding any risky behavior, no extreme sports, no accidents, no injuries. Because each one is a step closer to reaching the end of your body's capacity for regeneration." Jack's smile faded as the weight of her words hit him. His body felt like it was perfect, unstoppable. But now, he knew it wasn't. There was a limit. And every cell inside him was counting down to the moment when it would stop. Over the next few days, Jack kept to himself in his hospital room, reflecting on the strange reality Dr. Bishop had laid before him. He thought about the endless possibilities of perfect health, about how he had been healed, and how quickly it had all happened. He had never been this strong, this resilient. There had to be something incredible at work inside him, something beyond science, beyond explanation, but even as he marveled at his physical transformation, there was a gnawing fear eating away at him. He was running out of time. The clock was ticking. And once the healing stopped, there would be no going back. Jack had no idea how long he had, but every moment felt like a fragile gift. The truth was, he was scared. Not of dying, but of the unknown. Of what might happen when his last cell was used up. Jack sat on the edge of his bed, staring out the small hospital window. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the city. The streets below were a blur of people and cars, a bustling world that felt so distant now. It was as though he had been dropped into another life, one where nothing made sense, where every part of him was caught between life and death. His fingers traced the smooth, unscarred surface of his forearm, his mind churning with the implications of what Dr. Bishop had told him that he was healing. Yes, but the price was steep. How could he enjoy this newfound vitality, knowing that every time he pushed himself, every time he risked an injury, he was getting closer to the end? What kind of life was that? What was the point of living if it meant only living for a time that could not be measured? As he stared into the fading light, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, followed by a knock at the door. He turned, expecting another nurse or perhaps Dr. Bishop herself, but instead, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. It was Tom, his best friend. Tom looked exactly as Jack remembered him, rough around the edges, with a scruffy beard and a perpetual half-smile that always managed to make Jack feel like the world wasn't so heavy. He stepped inside, a bag of takeout food clutched in one hand. "You look like hell," Tom said with a grin, his eyes scanning Jack's face. "I guess the crash didn't take you out after all, huh?" Jack forced a smile, feeling the tension in his chest tighten. "Yeah. Apparently, I'm a walking miracle. You should see the doctors. They're freaking out over my recovery." Tom chuckled, placing the bag on the table beside the bed. "Well, you always were a hard one to kill." "I'm starting to think maybe I'm just impossible to kill," Jack said, the words hanging in the air. He shook his head, almost laughing at the absurdity of it all. "It doesn't make sense, man. I'm healed, no pain, no scars. I feel better than I've ever felt in my life." Tom's expression softened as he sat down on the chair beside the bed. "But something's off, right? You don't look right. Not like you used to." Jack stared at him, wondering if Tom had any idea how close he was to the truth. "I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, there's definitely something off. I'm healing too fast. I shouldn't be recovering like this. It's like I'm running out of time." Tom frowned, not following. "Running out of time? What do you mean? You've got plenty of time. You're lucky to be alive, man. You should be celebrating, not freaking out." "It's not that simple," Jack said, his voice lower now. He stood up, pacing the room, the unease in his chest growing. "The doctors said something's wrong. I can't heal forever. Every time my cells fix themselves, it costs me. Eventually, they'll run out of chances. I'll be fine for a while, but the next injury, the next time something breaks, it could be the last time." Tom's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Wait, what are you talking about? You're saying, you can heal, but it's not unlimited? That doesn't make sense." Jack nodded grimly. "It's exactly what they told me. My body is healing faster than anyone can understand, but there's a limit. Every cell in my body can only regenerate so many times before it just stops. And when that happens, I'm done." For a long moment, Tom was silent, absorbing the weight of Jack's words. His eyes flicked to the bandages that covered Jack's arms, as though seeing them for the first time, and then back to Jack's face. It was clear Tom didn't know what to say. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then finally spoke, his voice quiet. That's crazy, Jack. I don't know what to tell you. But you're still here. You're alive. You can't let something like that control you." I know," Jack interrupted, frustration creeping into his tone. "I know it sounds crazy. But it's not like I can just pretend it's not happening. The whole thing, it's like a countdown, and I don't know when it's going to run out. It could be tomorrow, or it could be years. But it's always there, ticking away." Tom was quiet again, his gaze flickering to the window, as if searching for some kind of answer in the sprawling city below. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with sympathy. "Jack, I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. But you can't keep living like this, in fear of the clock running out. You have to live. You've got to live like you've got all the time in the world." Jack shook his head, pacing again. "You don't get it. I don't have all the time in the world. And every time I push myself, every time I do something reckless, I know I'm closer to the end. It's like every time I heal, I'm using up my last chances." Tom watched him closely, his voice firm. "Maybe you should talk to Dr. Bishop. I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like she's the one who can figure this out. Maybe there's a way to stop this countdown, or maybe she can help you understand it better. But you can't keep avoiding it, Jack." Jack sighed, dropping down into the chair. "I'm not avoiding it. It's just that I don't know how to fix this. I can't just stop living because I'm afraid of dying. But I can't go on pretending this is all fine. It feels like I'm in a race I can't win." "Maybe," Tom said quietly, "you don't need to win the race. Maybe you just need to run the damn thing as best as you can." Jack looked at his friend, his chest tightening. "I just wish I knew how long I had. If I knew, maybe I'd know what to do." Tom stood up and clapped him on the shoulder. "We never know how much time we've got, Jack. The only thing you can do is live while you can. You've got a second chance. Don't waste it by looking over your shoulder." Over the next few days, Jack found himself wrestling with Tom's words, turning them over and over in his mind. He knew Tom was right, there was no way to predict when the end would come. But it was hard to shake the feeling of impending doom, the knowledge that at any moment, his body might stop healing. He couldn't help but feel like every moment he spent living was another moment stolen from an inevitable fate. He spent hours in his hospital room, pacing, thinking, until his thoughts began to spiral. Finally, he decided to take action. He had to do something, anything, to take control of this bizarre situation. He needed answers. Jack walked down the hospital corridors toward Dr. Bishop's office. Each step felt heavier than the last, his heart pounding in his chest. The idea of speaking with her again, of confronting the reality of his condition, filled him with both dread and a strange sense of purpose. He had to know everything, every detail, every possibility. If he was going to live, he needed to understand the rules of the game. When he reached her office, he knocked lightly on the door. A moment later, Dr. Bishop's voice called out from inside. "Come in." He opened the door, stepping inside to find her seated at her desk, reviewing a set of medical files. She looked up, offering a small smile as she set the papers aside. "Mr. Dawson," she greeted him. "What can I do for you today?" "I need to know more," Jack said, his voice steady, despite the storm raging inside him. "I need to know what's happening to me. I can't just live in the dark about this." Dr. Bishop didn't hesitate. She gestured to the chair across from her, and Jack took a seat. "What would you like to know?" she asked, folding her hands. "Everything," Jack said, his tone determined. "How long do I have? What's really happening inside my body? And most importantly, is there a way to stop it? To fix it?" Dr. Bishop sat back, her expression thoughtful. "I can't give you a definite answer. But I can tell you this, what's happening to you is unprecedented. There are cases of rapid healing, but nothing to this extent. Your cells are working at a rate we've never seen before. It's possible that there's a genetic mutation involved, something in your DNA that allows for this extraordinary regenerative capacity." Jack's heart raced. "So, there's no cure? No way to stop the countdown?" Dr. Bishop shook her head, her eyes dark with sympathy. "I don't know. We're still researching. But you need to understand, Mr. Dawson, the human body was never meant to heal at this rate. Eventually, your cells will break down. But we don't know when. You may have months, or you may have years. It's impossible to predict. Jack leaned forward, his mind spinning. And if I keep pushing myself? If I keep living like I always have? Then you'll be using up your cell's ability to regenerate. Every time you get injured, every time you strain yourself, you take a step closer to the end. There's no way to avoid it, Jack. Jack took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no choice but to accept it. The countdown was real. And every step he took, every decision he made, would push him one step closer to the end. Jack sat there in Dr. Bishop's office, his mind a whirl of thoughts. The way she spoke, so calm and professional, made it feel as though she was simply delivering a technical analysis, as if it were just another case. But for Jack, this was his life. A life that, at the moment, felt fragile, and every choice felt like it had the potential to shatter it. So what do I do now? Jack asked, his voice strained, betraying the nerves that had taken root in his chest. Just keep living like everything is fine, while knowing it might end at any moment? Dr. Bishop looked at him with an intensity that matched his own. It's not about pretending. It's about understanding. You need to decide how you want to live now that you know the truth. Every time you put your body through something extreme, whether it's an injury or intense physical exertion, you're burning through your regeneration capacity. But if you live cautiously, if you avoid pushing your limits, you might be able to stretch this out. Stretch it out. Jack repeated the phrase, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. How long do I have? I wish I could give you a more definitive answer. But we just don't know. The healing is unprecedented, and the process of cellular degradation is too complex. The only thing we can be sure of is that your cells can only regenerate so many times before they stop. Before they stop, Jack echoed, feeling the weight of the words settling over him like a fog. And then what? And then, Dr. Bishop said, her voice softening, you won't be able to heal anymore. The damage will become irreversible. Your body will break down. And there's nothing we can do at that point. Jack stood up abruptly, pacing the small office, the words from Dr. Bishop echoing in his mind. It was a countdown, like the ticking of a clock that never stopped. But it was worse than just a clock. It was a countdown of his very existence, a race against time that he couldn't win. So I just live my life in fear of running out of chances, he asked, the frustration in his voice rising. What kind of life is that? How am I supposed to live when every day is just another chance to end it all? Dr. Bishop's gaze softened, though her expression remained professional. You're not the only one who's ever faced the knowledge of their own mortality. It's just that most people don't have the added complication of knowing when their end will come. It's normal to want to control that, to fight it. But sometimes, the real challenge is in accepting it. We can't avoid death, Jack. But we can choose how we live while we're here. Jack stopped pacing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. So, I'm supposed to just accept this? Accept that I'm going to run out of time? Just keep living like I'm fine, like I'm invincible, until I hit the wall? Dr. Bishop stood up slowly, moving toward him. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you can't avoid it, but you don't have to live in fear of it. You still have control, Jack. You can choose to live fully, to make each moment count, to not waste the time you have left. You can find peace in that. Jack felt his heart thundering in his chest as her words sank in. He had always been the kind of person who went after what he wanted, who pushed his body to the limit and beyond. But this wasn't like a race or a challenge. This was about survival. And no matter how fast he ran, how far he pushed, the finish line was still waiting for him. He couldn't outrun it. I don't know how to live without that fear, Jack muttered, his voice hollow. Without knowing that every time I step out of here, it might be the last time my body heals. I don't know how to just keep going, knowing that every move I make is using up a chance. You have to find a way, Jack. You're still here. And that's something. Jack didn't respond immediately. He stood there for a moment, staring at the floor, his mind turning over Dr. Bishop's words. The idea of living fully while knowing that his body was on borrowed time felt impossible. How could he embrace life when it felt like every decision he made was one step closer to the inevitable end? It wasn't just about enjoying life, it was about surviving it, about understanding what it meant to truly live, even with the knowledge of death looming over him. After a long pause, Jack spoke. "So, what now? I just wait for the clock to run out?" Dr. Bishop paused before replying. "Not necessarily. We can run more tests. We'll continue to monitor your condition, and we'll try to understand what's going on at the cellular level. There may be a way to slow down the process, to buy you more time. But for now, all we can do is wait, and watch, and hope." Jack nodded slowly, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and hopelessness. Hope? Hope that his body could heal for just a little longer? Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something more that could be done. He didn't know what to feel anymore. But one thing was certain, he couldn't live in limbo forever. He needed to make a decision. He needed to take control, to do something that wasn't just about waiting for the end. A week passed, and Jack continued to feel like a man stuck between two worlds, one where his body was invincible, healing faster than he could comprehend, and one where his fate was sealed by a ticking clock, every moment a stolen gift that could disappear at any second. Tom visited him regularly, always encouraging him to get out of the hospital, to return to life as he knew it. But each time Jack tried to leave, a part of him froze. What was the point of living a normal life when it could all end in an instant? Was he supposed to keep pushing himself, running harder, jumping higher, just to feel alive? Or was he supposed to accept that it might all come crashing down and just live without fear, knowing that the end was inevitable? It was at night, lying awake in his hospital bed, when the idea first struck him. What if the real way to live was to stop fearing the end? What if the real challenge wasn't avoiding death, but facing it and still choosing to live with everything he had? Maybe there was a way to live fully, without pretending there was no end. Maybe there was a way to embrace the end, not as a defeat, but as a part of the journey. The next morning, Jack made a decision. He would leave the hospital. He wouldn't run from the reality of his condition, but he wouldn't hide from it either. He wasn't going to waste his time worrying about what was beyond his control. Instead, he would live each day as fully as he could. And when the end came, he would face it, not with fear, but with a sense of peace, knowing that he had lived as fully as possible. Jack spent the next few weeks rediscovering life. He took long walks in the park, letting the cool air wash over him as he breathed in deeply, savoring each breath. He met up with old friends, rekindling connections that he had neglected for far too long. He laughed harder than he had in years, danced like no one was watching, and threw himself into experiences he had always put off, adventures, road trips, spontaneous moments that reminded him of what it meant to truly live. The pain of his condition, the fear of what might come next, faded into the background. There were moments when his chest would tighten, when his body would ache, and his mind would race with the terrifying knowledge that he was using up his chances. But Jack didn't let those moments define him. He kept pushing forward. He kept living. Eventually, the fear of death was no longer a weight that dragged him down. It became something else entirely, something that reminded him of the beauty of life, of the things that mattered. He didn't need to outrun his mortality. He just needed to live in a way that made it all worth it. Jack had lived, and in the end, that was enough.